Hello my brothers and sisters of the Order, welcome back to the Order. I'm Celtic Templar, and yes, we are going back to the American Civil War. We're especially going to be covering another state, the state of, well, Missouri. Now, I want to explain to y'all, Missouri was originally a state that joined the Union Army, and in which it's actually stated to have been a border state that actually, well, was technically, well, on either side. But the thing is, most of Missouri was actually on the Union side. In fact, there was even thousands of Missouri volunteers that joined the Union Army in the early years of 1861. However, at that same year, later in 1861 especially, and early 1862, a captain by the name of Alex Lorraine had actually, made a huge mistake. One was the fact that he and his company were actually attacked by Confederate raiders somewhere from Arkansas, and in which actually made their way northward towards the state of Missouri, only to later on make their way around and further on back south. It's actually stated that Lorraine had stated that the Union forces should easily be able to counterattack against the said Confederate cavalry. In truth, actually, it stated that Lorraine had actually ridden his entire cavalry force past the Confederate army which attacked them in Kansas. Later on, attacked said Missourians all throughout the southern end of Missouri. It stated that Missouri suffered incredible losses. Many of them were thousands of innocent civilians. And in which it's even stated that Lorraine ordered his forces to execute any of fighting age male, meaning if it is a type of male at the type of age of, well, somewhere between 16 and 25, then they were to be shot dead. This was a war crime then in which Lorraine took responsibility for. He was later on executed on, 1862, early that year. But the thing is, it was already too late. Lorraine had already committed a mass genocide of innocent civilians, not just men, but women and children. They burnt down the homes and more. It's actually stated in one of Lorraine's journals that he stated that the Confederate forces are actually hiding somewhere in the said region, so we have every possible opportunity to destroy them, and as well any form of their supplies. How wrong he was. He destroyed innocent civilians all throughout the countryside of southern Missouri. Many times over, many Missourians hated the Union for this, especially those that joined the Union Army and in which rebelled or, in worse, joined the Confederacy. Many of them had actually started to fight for the Confederacy, in which, even in an open battle, when they heard this, it's actually stated that Union forces took massive measures of trying to end this conflict entirely with their entire army. However, the Union really didn't realize on what big mistake they made. And the thing is, even General Grant, at the early parts of the war, even told his army, especially those in Missouri, that they are allowed to return home and easily end this conflict entirely. However, when many Missourians actually returned to Missouri, it's actually stated that they found their homes burned down and as well their families either butchered or killed. Now, there's a huge difference at the time. It's actually stated that butchering at the time meant they were just hacked to death. When killed meant they were just shot. So, yeah. And the worst part is, many times over, many women were even raped by Union cavalry. That's right. The Union committed a massive of war crimes in which didn't even realize it. The thing is, before anyone knows this and starts commenting that this is not right and such, that the Union should not have actually done this, they couldn't have done this without the law, well, that's the thing. At this point in time, anywhere west of the Mississippi, it was technically like a martial law plan with the United States Army, meaning, what the United States Army says goes, and the worst part is, it got worse for the said Union there. This especially happened when many Missourians later on rebelled, and didn't exactly join the Confederacy, but especially didn't join the Union. It's actually stated they fought back against both said Confederates and Union forces. However, mostly, a lot of people started to side with the Confederacy, and as well, one of the most famous type of Missourians came to join the Confederate Army. That would be Jesse James. Jesse James actually joined the said Confederate rebels in Missouri, and in order to actually avenge himself against the Union. These type of Union would actually be the they would call themselves the Jayhawks, or Jayhawkers, as some people call them, and as well there would even be the Redlegs. The Redlegs are one of these really corrupt Union cavalry who of which killed and maimed anybody, burnt down homes, destroyed livestock, and everything. The thing is, many of these times over, these were just innocent civilians wanting to mind their own business and not be part of the war. Problem is, the Union further caused many Missourians to join the Confederacy, which many times over, many of the said Missourians start to believe that, the Union's just going to keep attacking us, so we got to fight back. So in which, many times over, many Missourians fought back against the Union. This is kind of where it gets horrifying for the Union forces, because this is where guerrilla war started to come into play. Now, Missouri, as I stated, was just an innocent civilians as being massacred by mostly Union forces, while the Confederacy didn't even care. They were actually just caring about the areas of their own home. However, many times over, there were even messages being sent from Missouri to the rest of the Confederacy, asking for aid, and as well alliance with the said Confederacy. And as well, this could easily be seen. In fact, there were even many famous said, bushwhackers. Bushwhackers were the southern variation of southern guerrilla fighters. These guys were pretty much hardcore guerrilla fighters who used their own type of tactics in order to defeat the Union. This could easily be said with Silas Gordon and as well William Cordine's Raiders, but however, the most famous would actually also be William Anderson, or as he's also known as Bloody Bill, in which he was actually stated to have maimed and killed hundreds of thousands of Union forces, and as well even hacked them to death, cut off their heads, and hang them from trees, even skinned alive. So that's kind of horrifying. And this was the same guy that none other than Jesse James joined up with. However, Missouri kept fighting from 1861 to the 1870s. Reason because they didn't want to actually surrender to the Union, who believed that, the Union were kind of the guys who attacked innocent civilians, which they kind of were. In fact, many of you might start saying, but Templar, see your reason behind this. Well, would you? In fact, it's kind of obvious. If you in the process saw your own neighbor being attacked by the said Union Army, what would you do? Would you join the Union Army, or would you rebel against the Union Army? That's my point. Now, there is a major thing, though, we have to understand, is the fact the United States government didn't exactly realize what was going on in Missouri because of the fact it was so far west, and they were more concerned on the eastern theater of the war. So, Missouri was technically a lawless land for the Union Army to do whatever they wanted. That's what made it worse. And the worst part is, the Union kept committing to these massive type of gruesome killing sprees all throughout Missouri. This later on joined to the fact of many Missourians fighting for the Confederacy. And in which, this is kind of like how we could actually view Vietnam, for example, especially with the Viet Cong. If now you understand what Viet Cong are, they are technically the, Vietnamese guerrilla during the time of the Vietnam War who fought against the United States. So, yeah, if a United States soldier in the process killed innocent civilians inside, said Vietnamese area, guess what? They're going to, in the process, join the said Viet Cong. So, yeah, if a Union soldier, for example, shoots innocent civilians, and they said Missouri said home, guess what? They're going to end up, many of those Missourians are going to later join the Confederacy and kill the said Union soldier. So, you can see the problem with that. Now, the thing is, this could easily be seen with many times over, especially in 1863, especially, when the Union kind of went a little too far, especially after the Lawrence Massacre. Now, there was also the Order Number 11 to actually issued to actually, force out any allies of the Confederacy, especially those who were loyal to the Union, especially in counties of Jackson, Case, Bates, and including Vernon. And in doing so, this made more and more Southerners in Missouri join the Confederacy in order to fight against the Union. The Union just kept making more and more enemies, and that's what caused more further problems. One Union officer even stated that the idealism of this conflict will only further damnation our army, and in such we are doomed to repeat our said mistake over and over again. So in doing so, the Union kept doing the same tactic, and it didn't work. So, how did the Union win? Well, for one, the war technically ended in the Eastern Theater of War, and many times over, the rest of the Union Army was technically pushing westward into Missouri in order to stop it. Problem is, many of them weren't wanting to give up until a later time in the 1870s. Especially Jesse James, who kept fighting for the Confederacy, even though he knows that it couldn't have said, well, kept fighting for it. In fact, there's even the legendary Jesse James gold that has been lost to time and still has not been found to this day that might have been belonged to the Confederacy in order to read manufacturer said Confederacy military group to fight against the Union. This is somewhat said to have been a myth or something like that, but I might need to do a Wild West video on Jesse James to do better for him than that, so yeah. However, this is what we have to understand. Many times over, many of these guys would have been badly injured and such, and as which they didn't want to keep fighting. They believed, we won our war fair and square against the said Union. However, the Union went a little overboard after they surrendered. This could easily be seen in the said film, Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood, which gets a good explanation of what happened in Missouri, especially after the Confederates surrendered. It's actually stated that many of these Missourian rebels were massacred instantly as soon as they surrendered, and as well, they gave up their firearms, and as well were fed and given rest, and as which many of them were shot and killed. But that wasn't the worst part. Many of them were later on dragged through the streets and, well, hung in front of homes and such. And as well, many Union officers stated that this is what happens to anyone who crosses the Union. This only caused further problems and later caused many other later rebellions in the said states. Many of these said officers were later on arrested and executed for their crimes. But not before these said same officers could commit to a same type of genocide in parts of Georgia, Alabama, and Carolina. And that would actually be on the Ku Klux Klan. That's right. Soon after the American Civil War, Grant had actually issued orders to actually have the same officers commit to the same type of tactic in order to defeat the Ku Klux Klan, thinking it would work. It did not. It only further caused further problems, in which we can see now that more people joined the Klan because of it. So in doing so, the Union caused their own enemy twice with the same tactic. So why is it that the Union never understood anything from their own mistake? Kind of obvious. The Union were too damn stupid to realize their own stupidity. And the problem is, it got worse and worse along the time. Some Union officers even stated of how idiotic this type of tactic was, and even stated to incredibly get rid of this tactic. Problem is, it was a little too late. Many times over hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians were murdered in the name of the United States government in order to defeat the Confederacy. But the thing is, the conflict could have been completely, pushed away if the Union hadn't been so stupid in the first place of attacking innocent civilians. So, in the early 1862 and later 1861 especially, that's where it all started. But now, many of you might wonder, but Templar, if Missouri fought for the Union, why didn't they just keep fighting for the Union even though it was a mistake? Well, as I stated, would you want to actually keep fighting for the Union even though you know that your parents, your mother, your father, your wife, your kids, or anybody else were being butchered for no reason, being raped, have your home burned to the ground? That's what I thought. You probably wouldn't. No one would. The major thing is, we have to understand the Union made a massive mistake by actually having idiot commanders trying to, well, make themselves look like good heroes. And in truth, these guys only made further problems by causing further problems. And in such, this is actually why in 1862 especially, that the United States lost a state, in as which the Confederacy gained one. However, this would not be the only state to have actually felt the same blow. Sometimes states such as Iowa, as well as Kentucky, and some other states actually were about to join the Union until they were somewhat broken up. But we had to understand the American Civil War in Missouri was a really gruesome guerrilla war then in which the Union was not prepared for. It's actually stated that Confederate cavalry, actually especially in Missouri, were famous being known as the Missouri Raiders, which later became an NFL football team. However, they later moved to, well, Oakland. That's right. Oakland Raiders. You gotta find that a little funny, actually. But the thing is, though, this is where we have to understand. These guys actually fought back in such a ferocious manner, using cavalry and as well attacking Union supply lines, gruesomely slowing down the Union effort to defeat this Confederacy. So, in truth, the Union started the conflict all because of an idiot, and in truth, it also later on furthered the entire conflict in Missouri up until somewhere around the late 1870s. So, did the war really end for Missouri? No, Missouri still hates Kansas for a reason. And we could see why for major examples. But now, I want to put this out here, y'all. The story that goes with the said Missouri fighters and such, well, the Missouri Raiders were later known as heroes, especially Jesse James, who fought back, especially against Union forces, even long after the conflict. Now, in truth, many Missourians still believe that the war was never over until later in the 1860s and 70s. However, they stated to have kept fighting, even though not realizing the war was all over, still committing to guerrilla warfare. But on which we have to understand that this conflict, we should never have actually happened in the first place. But yeah, this is where we had to understand. Anyways, guys, hopefully you liked this video. Like and subscribe for more information. If y'all want to know any more information, also let me know in the comments below, and I'll be happy to leave links down for y'all in the description, as I stated. As well, also check out our Facebook, like and subscribe for more, so that way you can actually help the channel grow. And as well, guys, hopefully we can actually see more videos on American Civil War. If y'all have any ideas I should cover next, please let me know in the comments below. Anyways, guys, it's been Templar. Have a great day.